Analyze for you the whole week's political development, and I'm together with our panelists here in studio, and they're going to exactly do that. Among some big stories that happened this week, let me just start with the last one, where the running mate of Miguna, that is an independent candidate who is eyeing Nairobi's top job, is stepped down. And then we have another story with regards to what happened yesterday at Deputy President William Ruto Sugoi home. We're going to talk about that, and remember the back and forth, the blame game between the government and the opposition of, opposition's claim that the government is trying to rig the elections using the Kenya Defence Forces. We're going to talk about that. Before going to a political pages segment, let me just start by introducing our guest right here in studio. On my far right is Dismas Mokua, who is a political risk analyst.
Yeah,
and then we have Mutinda Kavemba, who is a Jubilee strategist. And then we have Hezbon Owila, who is a political analyst as well. And last but not the least, Dr. Philip Chebunet from the University of Eldoret, right? More University of Eldoret. Yeah. Many thanks, all of you. Yeah. Oh, there's a university?
Yeah, University of Eldoret.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you all of you for joining us here at this hour. But first, let's begin with the political pages. Well, we begin with the splash here on the Sunday Nation, and it has everything to do with what happened in Sugoi there. And on this splash, it's clearly indicated that hard questions over daring raid on Ruto's home, shock as unknown people battle police let into the night after midday attack on Deputy President's rural residence. It's the same story that has been highlighted here on the Sunday Standard as well. And the splash goes like this. It says how gunfight at DP's home unfolded. And they gave us, bit by bit on what has been developing there since 9:45 a.m. up until about 20 minutes past 6 last evening. Our reporter Elvis Kosgei is going to join us shortly live from Sugoi and tell us more on what is happening on the ground. And of course, we're going to start our show by analyzing what happened yesterday. Let me just start with you, Mokua. Of course, I know you've watched what happened yesterday in Sugoi. There are people who are saying that this is something that might have been stage managed.
Well, maybe first of all, we need to look at the kind of GSU. Who GSU is. And my interaction with a number of GSU officers, they tell me that the basic training is 5 years. And 5 years is a very long time for any kind of training. And the training is done in Israeli, the training is done in America. And if you look at the global level, the Kenyan GSU as a paramilitary unit is highly regarded. And they're trained for both unarmed combat and armed combat. So if you get a general officer from GSU, whether or not you've got a weapon, it can easily overshadow you and take charge and take responsibility.
Because they're well-trained.
They're well-trained. They're very mentally agile, physically agile. Most of us in this state wouldn't even qualify to join the GSU right now, given our frame. Yeah. So these guys are really prepared, and they're ready 24 hours a day for this kind of assignments. Therefore, it's almost unbelievable that a fella can go across the road and buy a panga and then move into the DP's residence, knowing very well that it's a protected area. And for all intents and purposes, it's a security installation. So there's no way you can have a fella from the streets, buy a panga, then go to the DP's residence and disarm a GSU officer who is armed, and then, take charge of the situation for a lot of time. So in my view, looking at the information available in the public space, there's much more than meets the eye. You can't arrive at any conclusion apart from that there is actually some mischief intended. And you see, the Inspector General has not come out to actually give us the story of what happened. But again, expecting the Inspector General...
Actually, there was a statement from the IG.
Well, if you look at that statement, really, and Hezbon is a communication scholar, he'll tell you there's nothing you will get from that statement. In my view, it was a waste of time. We also need communication from the presidency, because apart from being a running mate to President Kenyatta, the deputy president is a national asset, and all Kenyans are supposed to be concerned about his safety. And the question people are beginning to ask, if you can have the deputy president's residence taken hostage for all this time, so what happens to the normal Kenyan, Wanjiku, in the streets? So there's really a lot that meets the eye, and we need to be told. However, we need to commend the GSU for a very swift and fast response. And this is the kind of response you would have expected when there was the Garissa attack. You remember for the Garissa attack, it took up to 8 hours before there was any resources deployed. But for Sugoi, a few minutes later, the place was overwhelming with resources, and you really begin to wonder whether or not, as a nation, we have prioritized our security interests. Because there is a genuine need now to have a GSU spread all over the nation. Because if a similar thing happens, say, in Bondo, it will take a lot of time because there's no similar GSU installation, say, around Bondo or around Lake Victoria. So maybe that's something that the IG needs to look as we make progress.
Kavemba, initially we were told there were several gunmen. It reduced to a lone gunman. Then it later changed to a man with a panga. What do you read in this?
Now, I think the Kenya police have a duty to explain to Kenyans because security is their docket.
Yes.
And the more they keep us in the dark, the more conspiracy theories we are going to hear. And I think they are duty-bound, actually, to come out clearly because this is an issue of national concern. This is the deputy president. It is not just any other person. About what he's saying is, he also, you know, there's a lot we don't know. Because, okay, you might have been trained for 5 years and you are attacked by someone who also underwent the same training or even a more serious training than yours. So until we get to know who actually was this person who attacked, we cannot buy that line of argument that this mass is advancing because it doesn't matter for how long you were trained because the person also who's attacking you might be equally good, if not better. So we are waiting to get, that's why we need to know
and of
who
course,
are these people.
Security officers have a duty to react to that. Before I come to you, Dr. Chebunet, I'm sure you know how the the premises, the Deputy President's home looks like and how the environment is. Let me just start with you, Wheeler. There are those who had indicated that this is a terrorism attack. Well, it was a bit premature.
I think it's a bit premature. You know, using the word terrorist attack, terrorism attack, basically labels somebody, you know, as somebody who is pushing an agenda that we don't know and is trying to hold the entire nation at ransom, which is not the case. It's a bit premature to talk about that. But I think looking at the development of the stories, I think you'd want to agree with Dismas, who is a risk analyst, that there is a risk when you have a well-trained GSU police force, you know, overwhelmed by certain individuals. And of course, we have to acknowledge the fact that they responded with speed and they contained the situation. But the reason why this is becoming more of a media spectacle and attracting speculations that probably it's stage managed is the way the media has been allowed, you know, to be the lead in all this. No one is giving much information. The bulk of what we are getting is through the media. And even the response from the IG is not as assertive as we want to believe. The people who seem to be having a clear picture of what happened comes back to the media. I know sometimes what happens in politics that politicians want to create a certain perception to achieve a certain agenda by allowing things to unfold so that the public interprets. And when it plays in the media, it works out for them. So there are things you cannot rule out. You cannot rule out the fact that it is stage managed because that is the perception that guys are getting. But again, you cannot talk about something being stage managed when even the person who is involved is a casualty. You know, there are deaths that are involved. So you cannot stage manage something and allow the people, your accomplices, to also suffer the consequences. But the key thing here is whether stage managed or not, whether it is a natural occurrence, because I don't want to push it to a terrorist act, ask yourself, what would cause a purported hawker to take a panga, because I think it has been reduced to a machete, to take a machete and move to the premises that is well guarded? You know, it must be a lot of frustration.
Actually, I was in studio yesterday and we were told the house is under siege. So we thought maybe something terrible is happening.
Yes.
But Dr. Chebunet, we're going to link up with our reporter Elvis Kosgei shortly and he's going to tell us what is exactly happening on the ground. I'm sure you're from there. You have contacts on the ground. What is going on?
It's actually shocking what happened to the person who is number 2 in the country. You find that when these things unfolded, it came out that it was a hawker. Really, it means this person has been going there selling his wares. These are hawkers who are familiar with the security apparatus. They know even the GSU
So
people.
you buy into the idea that this was not a gunman, he was a hawker?
This is just normal thuggery, because this person is used to going there, and he has been going there for many years. So I think what needs to come out clearly is what relationship do they have with the families that are inside there, because there are GSU who live inside there, and the place is well guarded. In fact, we were there on 31st. When the DP was meeting all leaders in Rift Valley, and you find that the place is well guarded. There are 2 gates. The first gate is where this thing happened, and the second gate now is where they could not go through. So had they gone through the second gate, we would be talking otherwise. And thank God that the DP had just left with Murgomen to Kitale. So these are people, I think it's just normal petty criminals and thieves who are looking for something to eat.
I think we'll end that debate concerning, or Dismas, you want to talk something about it?
Yes, there's something
because
that
there are a lot of speculation going on, and I'm sure we'll receive some sort of update in the course of the day from the IG, and is going to explain more what exactly happened yesterday.
Yeah, but as we go along, the question which remains unanswered is how is it that I feel I can go across the road, hawker or otherwise, buy a machete and disarm a GSU officer who we want to assume had a weapon. So even when you look at the basics, without the benefit of any security training or understanding, I mean, just compare a weapon, maybe an AK-47, whatever weapon they had, and a panga, or even referred to as a machete. How is it possible that a guy who is selling his wares, as Dr. Shebune is saying, can walk into the DP's compound and disarm a GSU officer and then hold the place hostage for hours on end? I would imagine that the place is under strict surveillance with a lot of CCTV cameras. So there's somebody who is supposed to be in the control room who has a global view of the entire homestead. So there are so many questions, very few answers. And in communications, if the government, or rather the presidency and the IG is not proactive in giving us solid information that we can actually believe, then the air is going to be filled with propaganda, alternative facts, fake news, all this kind of information. So it's up to the IG to retain the services of serious communication professionals and tell us, because you may not like the deputy president, depending on your political alignment, but is a state asset. We don't want to get into a situation where people start asking themselves, if the deputy president is not safe, then what about the common man? And the GSU officers who are trained in Israel, they're trained in street combat. They are very agile people. There's no way you would imagine that I feel like I can just go with a machete and disarm a GSU officer. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, Dr. Chimneta.
Yeah, I think, as I said, these are people who have been going there, and they're used. They even know how careless these GSU people are at the gate. So sometimes you even find people jumping over the fence at the White House, even here at State House.
But I think the big question here is who attacked the deputy president's home? And what kind of a person is he? Because initially, as Rodri mentioned, initially we got information that there were several gunmen. Then it turned out to be a lone gunman. Then from the IG statement, we're getting reports that it was a man who was armed with a machete. I think the big question is there: who is this individual? Who are these people who attacked the DP's house?
Actually, I want to support something that the doctor said. First, I think it would be right in assuming this is someone who's known in that compound, and probably that explains why he was able to pull an element of surprise to the GSU officer, because the GSU officer probably treated him like he's always treated him. Then this time, he has other intentions.
To an extent of putting the entire place under siege?
No, that's what I'm saying. There is a lot that, let me say that there is a lot that the police should be telling Kenyans. Because this is not helping anybody when they let all of us start guessing what happened. And yet this is something that they can just officially explain to Kenyans and put it to rest. And I believe as at now.
I think they did yesterday and people are not satisfied.
That clearly means they didn't address the real issue.
There is need to fill that gap with information, because if they don't fill, with the advent of new media and instantaneous flow of information, anyone can take advantage. But I think the crux here is whether it is political, whether it is a lone machete holder, whether it is somebody who is known, it is a bit dangerous to have a situation where the DP's house, the DP's home is attacked by anyone. If it is politically instigated, then it is even a lot more dangerous. Now, if it is just a lone ranger who decided that, you know, today I want to take advantage, it is even a lot more dangerous, because then what we have in the society, we have frustrated, disillusioned individuals who have nothing to live for. And therefore, they can subject themselves to a security cordoned area and attack people knowing that their life is in danger by doing that. So that, I think, is very dangerous, and it is important that we get information.
I think Kavemba also mentioned that there's need to stop speculating and allow the Inspector General to react properly to what happened in Sugoi. Of course, it is a political season, so we have to be very careful. Let's cross over to something very important now. And speaking about security matters, another security organ has come under sharp focus, and that is the Kenya Defence Forces. The opposition NASA are on record having accused KDF of trying to help the government, by extension the Jubilee Party, to rig the August 8th election. It's something that the government has come out vehemently denying those claims, and the acting Interior Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i and his counterpart from the Defence had a press briefing yesterday from Kisumu. Let's listen to the whole comments surrounding this debate. Still don't have those sound bites for you, but we're going to play them once we get them. Dismas, let me just start with you once again. You've had, I'm sure you've been following the news yesterday, and you've seen what the CS Defence, together with the acting CS of Interior, had to say about those claims made by NASA. Do you think what NASA leader Raila Odinga spoke about 2 days ago hold in water?
That's a very tricky question, because you need to back it with information. But maybe let's ask ourselves, why do we have leaks anywhere in the society, in the US, in the UK? The principal reason, number one, is to test policy or do some research. If you want to do something and you want to gauge how the public is going to react, you can unleash a leak so that you are able to gauge the public reaction. Number two, there are people within institutions who probably are unhappy with what is happening. And maybe they think whatever is happening is not consistent with the public good or public interest. So again, they would unleash this information in the name of a leak. I think they're popularly referred to as whistleblowers. And then people may leak out this information because they've been promised that, okay, that I give us this kind of information, there's going to be a financial benefit based upon you. But now going back to Raila Odinga and his track record, it's very clear that if you look for the last 5 years, when Raila has come up with any information, at the end of the day, it's come to fruition. At some stage, he spoke about NYS. Everybody in town said, you're misleading the nation. But eventually, people said, okay, this is NYS.
And they are two brothers.
Yeah, he came with the two brothers. He came with the Eurobond.
Dr. Chibuna is an agreement with you.
So he's got a track record of success. And it's often said that if Raila Odinga tells you your daughter is pregnant, then be prepared to be
But this is a critical issue, and it has everything to do with the country's security.
Yeah, but now I'm going to the critical issue.
Yes.
In my understanding, and looking at Raila Odinga, he's not a reckless man. He creates the impression of a wise man. So he wouldn't come to town and make statements which are wishy-washy. But after making that statement saying that there's probably a strategy to rig the elections, the military spokesman came out and he actually accepted in principle that what Raila had said is the case. But he said that they were quoted out of context. Now the big question is, what is this context? That's what we need to be told, that this is the context. Because it's very easy you could be having a conversation and somebody quotes you out of context, which is normal. But now we need to be told what was the context. That's number one. Then number two, the statement issued yesterday by Rachel Mamo was very condescending. The way she addressed the entire issue, the way she did the media conference, it's as if she was engaged in a domestic altercation. Because, she didn't pay attention to what the journalists were asking, and it didn't occur to her that she was addressing the entire nation. So she was a bit condescending. And at that stage, you need to give Dr. Matiang'i a pat on the back. Because normally in the past, he seemed to be having a lot of energy. But yesterday, he was very restrained, and he spoke very well. So now the buck stops with the military to come out and clear the air and tell us in what context were they misquoted, so that Kenyans have got a global understanding. But again, it's important, Yusuf, to realize that the Kenyan military has been trained to take charge of our external borders, to take charge of our enemies who are coming from the outside. They're not supposed to have any role within internally, because the soldiers are supposed to be in the barracks. Wherever there is external aggression, they go and take care of those issues. And President Kenyatta has said that the Jubilee administration has invested a fortune in the Kenyan police. You've seen all the manner of weapons are being displayed. So by us being told that there's a very high chance you're going to have the military participating in the electoral process, one can easily come to the conclusion that they have no confidence in the police, despite the resources which have been invested, which is important again. I think Jubilee is facing really a crisis in communication. They need to be proactively telling us that if you're going to get the soldiers out of the barracks, for political process, what is their exact role? If you're going to have the Kenyan police taking part in the electoral process, what is the exact role? When you don't come up with this information, it's very easy for people now to fill that gap with propaganda, rumors, alternative facts. And at the end of the day, who suffers? It's Wanjiku.
I'm sure Kavemba will want to react to that. And Dismas Mukua has already mentioned something very important, that the KDF have already said that, you know, they've been taken out, the report that was leaked, or the alleged report, has been taken out of context. Now, just to put our conversation into some sort of context as well, let's listen into what the NASA leader Raila Odinga had to say.
Jeshi la Kenya linaheshimika duniani kote, na sisi wananasa hatutaruhusu Jubilee kuharibu jina la majeshi yetu.
Tunataka kumkumbusha amiri jeshi mkuu ambaye ni Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Aliweka sahihi mswada wa bunge ambao unasema the security forces should not be involved in election.
The comments made by a section of NASA leaders that happened yesterday during NASA's tour of the Ukambani region. Now, Kavemba, once again, you've heard what Mukua had mentioned about, the issue surrounding, the allegations that have been raised by NASA. Do you believe the NASA leader, Raila Odinga, is making some sort of, sense? Is he talking the truth?
Now, I think first is that there has to be a basis for his allegations and his suspicions that probably the military wants to be wrongly involved. But I think more importantly, so that we are very clear, we don't get caught up in the political aspects of it, is to look at the Constitution, what the Constitution says. Because the Constitution is very clear on what circumstances you can use the military in internal affairs. And there is the provision that in such case, then there should be parliamentary approval. Clearly, I don't think we've gotten that kind of parliamentary approval because the military help internally is something that is provided for, but with that condition that there has to be parliamentary approval. And that has not been forthcoming. And that makes it very difficult because, you see, military is a very sensitive, Kenya Defense Forces is a very sensitive institution. And ordinarily, it should not be partisan in any way. So first is to establish whether there is a confirmation from them as KDF that they have been requested to help in certain areas in this election. If not, then we ask ourselves, what is the motive of NASA going public about this? Probably they also want the military itself to have this discussion because they might be feeling that there are some people who are being used in an unofficial way within the military. And the only way to make the military also come out and state their position is to bring it out to the public. So these are suspicions. I'm talking about suspicions by NASA. Because they have no way of confirming, they decide that their strategy is to make it a public debate that will actually compel the military to also come out and state their position. So that if there was anyone probably trying to use the military in ways that were not right, the open discussion about the matter, even within the military itself, will make them back off. That is probably the motivation, if you ask me. If you ask me why NASA is making these allegations, it's because it might be having some suspicions that they cannot substantiate as at now. And the best they can do is to make sure that they take the discussion out there so that everyone is compelled to give their position on the matter, including the military, which is actually what happened. You saw the military spokesman was prompted to give a position. I think that is the kind of thing that NASA wanted, now that they are not in a position to really substantiate exactly what it is they are alleging.
Willa, before we take a break, we've had both the CS of Defense and that of Interior almost immediately reacting to that statement that was made by Raila Odinga. Do you agree with Kavemba that they should have at least sat down and do some sort of investigation before coming out and vehemently denying something that has been raised by the NASA leader?
I think it's important to note that even their response in itself is good in terms of having a public discourse about all this. And to an extent, I agree with Kavemba that when there is suspicion, and it is suspicion about something that is of public interest, it is just important that anyone raises it whether they can substantiate or not. I mean, the fact that there's public interest involved means that you don't have to even be right, you know, but you need to raise it. It happens even in investigative journalism, where journalists, if they smell a rat somewhere, they have a right to investigate and even cross over the ethical boundaries if the public interest is involved. But I think the most important thing here is the fact that NASA is raising an issue that is very pertinent, and the military is known, the Kenyan military is known globally to be a very disciplined force. And I think the pedestal place that they occupy in the global world of the military forces is very sacrosanct, that we need to protect as a country. And therefore, that means that it is incumbent upon them to come forth, you know, and make things clear. You know, this back and forth between the cabinet secretaries and the spokesman should be cleared. But I think for me, the most important thing is to have IBC also chip into this conversation and tell us to what extent is the military coming in to help in the electoral process. Because we know, I mean, Kenya has been attacked by external forces, including terrorists, you know, and there are instances that we've seen the military come in even without the approval of parliament. I think they came in during Westgate, they helped. So when military comes on board in an activity like an election, I don't think they are coming in their capacity as the military. Maybe they were involved in training to give capacity to the police force. Maybe the police force has new gadgets that they can't use. So there is need to have that clarity. But going back to what Dismas said, I think anytime the Right Honorable Raila Odinga has spoken, anything he has said has come to pass. And I think I like what NASA is doing, and I appreciate what they're doing, because this election is for all of us. So if there is any suspicion, it is only important that everything is addressed before the election. So that after
just
the election, to clear the
and of course,
but lastly, the most important thing is, I think there is a sense in which also you perceive an element of calling the attention of the whole world to the Kenyan election. And because of the pedestal place that the military occupies, by bringing in the military in all this, in essence, what NASA is trying to do is to call the internal community to ensure that they also watch what the military is doing, that if they intend on doing anything wrong, they would back off just before the election.
And of course, there are those who come from the school of thought that, you know, whenever there's smoke, there's definitely going to be fire. You're going to react to that, Dr. Chebunet, but we have to take a very short break, and I'm sure you're going to come in handy when we start discussing issues to do with the Rift Valley politics, where something interesting happened in the course of the week. A section of NASA leaders endorsed or supported Uasin Gishu governor, who is on a Jubilee ticket for that position come August 8th. We're going to discuss that and much more right here on Sunday Edition. Don't go too far. We'll be right back. We'll be right back.
This is KTN News.